It has to be one of the most boring budgets I've ever seen. I'm already calling it the budget that never was in an article I have to write today, because it was conspicuous for what wasn't there far more so than what was there. So perhaps it's not surprising that Wayne Swan played it very, very safe last night. Just about every policy that he read out on his half-hour budget address in Parliament House had pretty much already been leaked to the media. There were no surprises there. There are also a lot of contradictions, and I guess if I had to characterise the budget in two other ways, so apart from being the budget that never was, I think it was a budget that was full of a few contradictions, some of them funny, some not so, and also a budget that I think is actually overly optimistic. Firstly, we heard a lot about training and upskilling Australia and doing all sorts of things to deal with the fact that if we have a very low unemployment rate, clearly we're going to need more workers. And tied to that, of course, is an increase in skilled migration of 16,000 people. And yet at the same time, the government wants to make HECS less attractive. That is, it wants to stop people from paying HECS up front, effectively to make it more expensive for a lot of them to go to university. I struggle to sort of reconcile the two things. Why fiddle with HECS, which is a major financial impost on people who go to university these days, while at the same breath, at the same time, saying we've got to upskill Australia, we've got to deal with the skills shortage here. It doesn't make sense. But it does seem odd to me to, on one hand, be saying to everybody, you know, CO2 emissions are evil, they are wrong, they are going to destroy modern civilisation as we know it. And yet at the same time be saying, but aren't we lucky to be benefiting from the growth of China and iron ore and coal and all that sort of stuff? It's a huge contradiction. On one hand, we want to stop emissions, or at least reduce emissions here in Australia. But on the other hand, for this budget to have any hope of succeeding over the next few years, for Australia's fiscal position to get back to surplus, as the Treasurer and the Prime Minister were so keen to point out by 2012, 2013, we cannot afford to have China cutting their emissions because we need them to be buying all the stuff that we pull out of the ground. So the budget has some contradictions, but perhaps that's to be expected in modern life. There were some funny little things in there as well. There's a curious tax deduction I call the Ferris-Bueller deduction, and this is where people who've got company cars get increased deductions whether they do 15,000 or 25 or 40,000 k's per annum. People essentially go on pointless trips driving up to Albury-Wodonga and back down and up again to get their cars above whatever the magic kilometre mark is. And I'm actually pleased to see that the government has stopped that. They're going to have a standard $5,000 tax deduction for work vehicles, and I think a deduction simply based on the purchase price of the vehicle. That makes a lot more sense. I think the national broadband network is either it's going to cost a lot more or it's simply going to be delayed and it's not going to happen. But it was conspicuously absent in last night's discussion on the budget as to what's really happening there. So what about optimism and, in my sort of cynical mind, over-optimism? What really worries me is that we still have this great goal of getting back to surplus in 2 years' time. But it seems to me everything's got to go right for this to happen. The terms of trade have got to stay high. China's got to keep buying everything we can dig out of the ground. Unemployment's got to drop to almost historic lows. Economic growth has to exceed pretty much the rest of the developed world. All these things have to happen just to get back to a surplus of a very small amount, $3.5 billion in 2 years' time. Again, the cynic in me just wonders, is this really going to happen? And I think it's a good idea to have a plan B, and I worry that we simply do not have that. So overall, look, the chances are Australia's budgetary position is probably going to be okay. The chances are that the various contradictions and everything in the budget really don't matter very much, and they're more amusing than anything of real concern. The chances are that unemployment probably will continue to go down, and that will be fantastic for the Australian workforce. The chances are that China will probably be okay, keep expanding and hopefully settle into some capitalist, quasi-democratic, still autocratic future that will be very beneficial to Australia. Would I bet on all these things happening when they're supposed to happen? No, I wouldn't. Thank you very much.